Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
And welcome back to America's Heroes Group. In this section, we have a roundtable with our partner, the DAV Chapter 17. June is LGBTQ plus Pride Month. Today is Saturday, June 25th, 2022. Just heard our host, Kelley, during the break. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Arnold Productions. And we have a great show for this section. We have our panelist, Renee Dickerson. Renee Dickerson is a former director of the Department of Veterans Affairs Readjustment Counseling Service program, also called the Vet Center, in Chicago Heights, Illinois, where she managed a team of clinical providers specializing in combat and military sexual trauma. She's also a Chicago native. She served with the United States Air Force for 7 years. She earned a master's degree in counseling from Eastern Illinois University and is a PhD candidate at the Institute for Clinical Social Work. Ms. Dickerson is a member of the National Council of Negro Women, the NCNW, American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, and the Disabled American Veterans, and the International Association for Psychoanalytic Self-Psychology. She's currently employed with the Veterans Benefits Administration. Welcome to our show.
Good evening.
So we want to talk about what happened with the Supreme Court. This is a topic we're coming back to. We had a lawyer on earlier and give us some background and a lot of insight as to what happened, how it happened, and then also what the legal meanings of what's going on. So what do you have to tell us about how this affects women and also women veterans from the health side of things?
Well, from the perspective of women who serve in the military and also veterans, that was an avenue for women, especially those experiencing military sexual trauma. If they chose to have an abortion, they could at a civilian institution. Mm-hmm. And with the potentiality of that, well, actually it has been taken away in 26 states. And you have military members stationed in those 26 states.
And that's the thing that people don't realize. A lot of those red states, the South is heavy with military bases. So a lot of these things are occurring in places where there's a high concentration of veterans and a high concentration of military population.
Absolutely. In Texas, there's over 72,000 soldiers and 35,000 Air Force and Space Force Guardians. And Texas is definitely one of the states that abortions are outlawed.
So now with the new laws, some of these trigger states, there's about 13 trigger states that happen. So as soon as the Supreme Court, which is based on the Dobbs versus Jackson's Women Health Organization, they revisited the right to abortion. They in their language are saying that they still agree with the right to privacy, but they don't agree with the right to an abortion. I guess based on the open door that the Roe versus Wade case had, which said in their language that they had a concern about the rights of the unborn. So now we have a situation where at the federal level, there's no protection for abortion. So the states can make their own laws. Every state can do what they want to do, basically.
That is true. And I did read an article regarding DOD are looking at some options. They have not been announced, but Austin Lloyd definitely said that he was going to put women's rights, reproductive rights, forefront. And what that means, we don't know. But he will have to stay within the parameters of the law.
I was really confused by, to an extent, because with the court, why they pushed it back on the states. They said the woman doesn't have right to an abortion. There was a case back in 1992 called Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and they came up with this idea of fetal viability. So to give you some context, without going through the whole history of abortion in the United States, because once upon a time, well, I might as well go through it. But prior to 1850, abortion we're in a British common law which permitted abortion under what's called quickening. And when a pregnant woman can first feel movement in the fetus, which is about 15 to 20 weeks, after that you couldn't have an abortion. But then after 1900, they pretty much almost limited abortion almost across the board. Every state was like, no, you cannot have an abortion unless it was rape or incest. And then in 1973, Roe versus Wade comes around. That's the next probably biggest thing that happened, where the issue was privacy. She said, I have a right to my own body. This is my own private health issue that I'm dealing with. The case dragged on, so she had her child during that case. However, the court said that yes, you do have a right to privacy. However, we still have an interest in the life of the child. So they created a trimester system where they had every 12 weeks, they reevaluated, is that child a baby or is that child still a bundle of cells? And that has always been my question. Okay, how accurate is that? As far as, what you're going to decide when is something living organism or a human being or a bundle of cells, or when does life begin? The biology books could tell you it starts at conception. Other people will tell you different things. I'm not interested in pontification or trying to speculate what it is or what it's not. I'm more interested in science, in biology, to say, okay, when is this really could be a viable life? So they came out with that during the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case in 1992, where they rewrote a little bit of that trimester system, because in the first trimester, you could have an abortion. The state couldn't regulate it. The first 12 weeks, you can go have an abortion. Okay, that's off the table for the most part across the country. Unless you live in a state that's going to uphold that across the country, that's pretty much off the table. The second trimester, the court said that you can regulate abortions if the regulations were reasonable and related to the health of the pregnant person. So that second 12 weeks, which is the 24 weeks, gets you into that time frame. The states could regulate it, but not prohibit it. But then that third trimester, the state could do what they needed to do to regulate or stop abortions. I think a lot of people would probably agree that seems, if you know nothing about biology, probably seems reasonable. Okay, regardless of what your beliefs are, religious-wise or philosophy-wise or whatever, it seems if you get that late into a pregnancy, you're getting close to when it's probably not too feasible. So fetal viability, which they talked about in that Planned Parenthood versus Casey case, basically said that and this was based off of their understanding with the Supreme Court and the American College of Obstetrics, I messed up that word, and gynecology, consider a fetus to be viable starting at between 24 to 28 weeks. Even though there's no hard line when you can determine that, but that's when they said, okay, 24 to 28 weeks, that is what we're going to go by. The Supreme Court in this time didn't even look at that. They just passed it off to the states.
That is interesting. And you speak of biology. However, what if a person is raped? Mm-hmm. What if the pregnancy was unintended? And the numbers did go down as far as the number of abortions, 2017 and 2018, but by 2020, the abortion numbers went up. There's been an 8% increase.
You think that was mostly because of the pandemic? Has those numbers come down, or that's still?
Or unplanned pregnancy. It does put women in the position that they have to continue to fight for their rights and their bodies. Now, we were talking about women who are serving in the military. A pregnancy at a particular time might not be the most opportune, especially if they're trying to be promoted and they have to maybe be transferred to a location where they can't take a family. And being pregnant would interfere with that duty station, being placed at the duty station. So understanding the importance of science, when is life considered a life, is very significant. But there are also other factors. And it's interesting when we're talking about women going to have an abortion, there's normally protesters. I've never heard there being protesters in front of gun shops.
You don't hear about it, which is interesting too, because the dynamic here is you got people that are pro-life but are pro-gun. You got people who are pro, don't want government in their business, but they're the first one to cash your Social Security check. It's a duality in our country, which is doesn't seem healthy. It's ironic.
And with each mass shooting, gun sales go up. Mm-hmm. And we know the effect of what bullets can do to the human body. Protesters in front of abortion clinics will show photographs of fetuses that have been aborted. I have never heard of photos being shown outside of a gun shop of what bullets can do to the human body.
And that's true. Matter of fact, but you have heard of people who have gone out of their way to harass and terrorize children, even to this day. Children that have gone through these traumas 10, 20 years ago, still being harassed
Absolutely.
today, being called liars and actors, and they just nearly lost their life.
And a great deal of their life has been lost due to that trauma, the trauma of witnessing and experiencing a mass shooting. Abortion rights is not a simple, there isn't a simple solution.
I definitely agree with that. It seems to be the most, I think since slavery, a lot of people say this, historians say this, probably since slavery, there's probably never been a more complicated, I'd put probably gun rights and gun issues, but not so much. In from what I can see too, though, I'm not necessarily a pro-gun person. I'm not an anti-gun person either. I like guns. I don't own any guns, but I like guns. I was in the military. I liked my M16. I did. It was fun to shoot. I never had a thought of using it to harm anyone, unless I had to in the course of combat, where it was defending either my country or defending my fellow soldiers. However, the thing that's ironic about when you look at how guns are used today, we don't want to even use simple gun measures to just try to weed out or control who has access to a gun. I don't have to have a problem with someone getting licensed. And a lot of gun owners that I have friends that have tons of guns, and I probably will buy a shotgun one day just because I would love to be out in the woods, and I don't want to necessarily have to kill a bear, but if I have to, I don't care what the rules are. I'm not getting eaten by a bear. Now I'll have me, a Mossberg or something on my side to keep me protected. But the thing is that anybody shouldn't be able to just go into a gun shop and then meditate on what they're going to do with it. I'm talking about history, things that I've been exposed to. I remember I had took an assignment years and years ago. This is outside the military, and we had a person who just did not want to follow the rules. They always wanted to do their own thing. And it was just silly stuff, like going home early or not showing up for work or, lying on their timesheet. It's like stuff that you just can't do. And I became this person's supervisor. So then I said, you know what? I can't do that on my watch, man. You can't do that. But I don't have the power to fire you, whatever. I'm just warning you that, people are watching, people realize you're doing this stuff, whatever. But, when times get tough and they had to make cuts, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to get rid of, somebody who's working hard or somebody who's, who's not working as hard. It looks good on paper what you're doing, but people know that you're kind of like doing your own thing, and you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So once this guy gets fired, I get a call one day from one of the supervisors saying, you need to go home right now. It's like, it was only 3 o'clock. We get off at like 4. So, no, you need to leave right now. I said, okay, I'm not going to argue with that. I'm going to pack up and, it was middle of something, packed it up and left. He had brought a I think it was called I think he had a Desert Eagle, but a 45 Magnum is a similar handgun to work. And he had written some letters and emails saying that he was having nightmares or dreams about killing everybody. And I guess he blamed me, from what I could gather, because he got fired. When I had nothing to do with it. They didn't ask anybody else to go home. And I'm the only black guy in the building.
So you know that experience firsthand. And yet there isn't as many restrictions and laws governing guns as there are for women's bodies. It is definitely easier to buy a gun than have an abortion.
But that's the weird part about it, though. So from a person who's pro-life, what they're hearing is that that it's okay to kill a baby.
But doesn't a gun kill more people?
But it's not to me. It's not an if or debate. Like to me, I can't make the decision as to when. Like I'm not the person qualified to say this is when you should have an abortion. This is when you shouldn't have an abortion. But as far as guns, to me, it's not that hard. You need to have everybody. We know that from studies that if you're thinking about committing suicide, and we got about 1 minute left, or we got a little bit of time left. We got 12 minutes left. When you're thinking about committing suicide, if a person can just wait 20 minutes, if they're delayed 20 minutes, they usually don't commit suicide. The person who's going to commit a mass shooting is also suicidal.
Yeah.
They do plan it out, and people that commit suicide also plan out their suicides. But if they get delayed 20 minutes, I can't see how that wouldn't apply to a person's thinking about doing a mass shooting. The person's committing suicide is going through all the steps, all the methodology that goes through to carry out these types of heinous acts. However, I've asked this question to psychologists before, and they said that, yeah, there's two different ideations. Some people want to just hurt themselves because they have that pain inside them, but some people want to hurt other people. But pretty much the ideation is very, very similar. What makes a person an introvert as far as wanting to just kill themselves versus trying to lash out and react to other people? I mean, that I don't know. Maybe we should look at that and try to get a better handle on what's going on. And I do think we need to look at mental health. Gun advocates even say that all the time. However, we never seem to really get a handle on that. We never seem to make any action towards it. We have protests, we make some noise, we do all kinds of things like that, but we don't actually get up and do anything about it.
No, we do not. We don't do enough regarding mental health. And as we have children, and the quantity of children being born, we're not taking into consideration the quality of life. And so there tends to be more planning and more funding for prisons and the criminal justice system, but not for children in the low-income communities.
It reminds me of another study I didn't hear the whole study. It was actually on NPR, and that's long ago, maybe about a month ago, when the Dobbs case first started getting, or not maybe first started getting like light, but it was picking up a lot of steam at that point. And I didn't hear the whole study, but I want to look that up and read about it, because there was actually an economic study done that looked at the impact of abortions in communities. But when it first came out, I think it was back in the 70s or something like that. If you Google it, you probably can find it. It was a very well-known study, and it was very controversial because it actually came out in favor of abortions. And the first thing people started thinking about, and it was even people that were pro choice were kind of appalled by what the study kind of revealed. But it wasn't trying to promote one side or the other, from what I understood. It was just saying the raw numbers show, from what I gather, I don't have all the data, but from what it seemed like the bottom line is that crime went down, poverty went down. Suicides went down. All the negative things in society went down when people had greater access to abortions, or even when abortions were even encouraged. I think is what it came down to, or that was maybe the gray area that I didn't quite understand or quite maybe hear right.
Or when they had a choice. People had a choice if they wanted to have an abortion or not. But when the choice is taken away, there is an increase in the societal ill. Limited health care, child care, for performing educational systems. This is not an easy fix. There isn't a simplistic solution.
So what do you think is the next step for people who are trying to, who want to change things? What do you think is the next step? Because like we talked about earlier, voting can get you a new Congress and get you a new president. It doesn't get you a new Supreme Court. That could take years and years and years of presidents appointing Supreme Court justices and going through the trial hearings and seeing what they like and what they don't like. What's the next step for people that want to change what's the status quo today, or what might become the status quo in a few years from now?
Again, that is not there isn't a simple solution for that, but to have people from all sides with all opinions come together to listen to one another. We need more of a balance of power. The United States is the greatest country in the world, and we have definitely taken several steps backward in our thinking and our actions. We definitely need to get a handle on all of these shootings, these mass shootings, and taking away protective rights is not the answer.
Now, if I can ask you a personal question, not about your too personal or too private, but from your perspective, when is a reasonable time frame when a pregnancy is viable versus not viable? So essentially, when should an abortion be, when it's not affecting the woman's health or the life of the woman? When is an abortion, in your opinion, reasonable?
That is, I think, between the woman and the doctor, taking into consideration the person's health, the situation the pregnancy was caused in, that it cannot be answered with a black or white answer.
That leads us back to where we were at Roe versus Wade, because then we get back to a kind of a vague, trying to be a black and white solution, but then it has a lot of flaws in it. Then people can pick at it this way and pick at it that way, and the next thing you know, it's taken apart. Or you get another
like
situation.
The Constitution.
Yeah, like the Constitution. That's basically what it is. It's interesting. I read a number. This is from CNET.com. CNET had a really interesting article. It was it's on CNET.com. It's called Abortions in Areas Where We're Going Next. Something along those lines. But anyways, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, 79% of abortions in the United States in 2019 occurred before 9 weeks. 93% before 13 weeks. So people aren't waiting till the last minute to get abortion typically.
And still, that is argued.
Yeah, we have people that disagree on those types of things.
Yes.
You know, but I mean, the studied numbers show that, I mean, most women are actually, you know, they're, you know, getting abortions before 13 weeks. So, Renee, I appreciate you for your time.
And thank you.
This was, I think, a good conversation. There's a lot more we can go with, a lot of stuff we can really, really do with this conversation.
Very difficult conversation, but it's a conversation that needed to be had.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.